Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Danielle Angelari, and I'm the Executive Director of NAMI Northern Illinois, which is an affiliate of the National Alliance on Mental Illness and the nation's largest grassroots organization dedicated to improving lives of individuals and families living with mental illness. Welcome back, Adam. Our group serves Winnebago, Boone, and surrounding counties in our region. We support those in need through various peer-led groups. We educate families in our community. We advocate by helping to shape public policy and programming for people living with mental illness and their families. We lead awareness events and actively fight stigma to encourage understanding, and we provide the tools and resources necessary to improve the response to mental illness for all. To begin tonight, I just wanted to share a few updates with everyone on NAMI Northern Illinois. So I do have an updated list of support groups that I would be happy to share via link in the chat box if you're interested. Some of our locations have changed. For adults, their peer recovery support, we offer 3 weekly groups, one that's virtual on Sundays and 2 that are in person Wednesdays and Fridays. For teen peer recovery, we offer 2 support groups per month, both in person. For families, we have 4 group times for caregivers of adults, 2 that are currently meeting virtually and 2 that are in person. And our caregiver support group for parents of children with mental health conditions is a one-on-one style basis. So you can contact our office to set something up like that. And for a full view of the list, again, you can check out the link that I will provide after I stop talking. This weekend is actually our retail therapy arts and crafts show. We invite you and your friends to come on down to Forest Hills Lodge Saturday the 25th and Sunday the 26th from 9 to 4 on Saturday, 9 to 3 on Sunday. Vendors will be selling handmade goods that include home decor, bath and body products, accessories, jewelry, and just about everything else. So we're excited for it. It's our second annual one, and it couldn't have gone better last time. So I'd also like to mention that Mental Illness Awareness Week is upon us. Mental illness impacts everyone. Unfortunately, stigma and misunderstanding are also widespread, which is why each year during the first full week of October, NAMI Northern Illinois and participants across the country raise awareness on this topic. This year, we're focusing on being kind to your mind. We cannot create a more accepting community without you. Please participate with us by joining in 6 days of free events. I'm just going to go over briefly what they are. Again, I will send you to our calendar so you can read more. Sunday, October 3rd, we're going to do a free YMCA day at the Swedish American Riverfront Y and the Northeast Family Branch. You can tour here, you can exercise, use amenities, the pool downtown by reservation. You do just have to register online with them first. Sorry. Then on Monday, we're going to do something called Food for Your Brain with OSF St. Anthony Medical Center. They're going to host a cooking class and speak about the importance of nutrition for your mind and body. The class will be limited to about 18, but we'll also videotape and live stream. On Tuesday, we'll have a holistic therapy-based addiction recovery webinar. So that will be at 7 p.m. On Wednesday the 6th, we'll have a viewing of A Silent Voice, which is a Japanese animated teen psychological drama, and it kind of goes over what teens face growing up, and then we'll have a talk back at the end with one of our friends who is a licensed professional counselor. On Thursday at State Line Church, we'll have the Be Kind to Your Mind event, which is kind of based on faith communities, which can be an incredible source of strength and support for people. And they're going to kind of talk about how to integrate mental health ministries and the power of being kind to your mind. And then finally, October 8th is a Friday, and we'll be doing our rally for mental health at noon at Veterans Memorial Hall. This is where we promote awareness and kind of have some awesome community speakers come in. We also promote 5 different individuals who are nominated for making a difference in the mental health care world here. And don't forget to check out our partners at Wired Cafe, Katie's Cup, One Love Candle and Bath, and City Hall of Rockford, because they're going to be doing some special stuff with us as well during the week. Now, on to the main event. Adam, welcome back. I'd like to introduce you to Adam Howarth. Adam is an LCSW from Madison, VA, working to provide community-based interventions for suicide prevention for service members, veterans, and their families. And he has an awesome background in this, and he's going to present to you the VA S.A.V.E. training, which will help you act with care and compassion if you encounter a veteran who is in crisis or experiencing suicidal thoughts. Please note, at the end of the presentation, I will be sending an evaluation to the email addresses you registered with, and I will need them returned to me if you wish to receive a CEU. Those will be distributed as soon as possible. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use your raise hand feature. You can unmute yourself as well. I'll let Adam take those. And just thank you all again for joining us, and thank you, Adam, especially. I'm going to turn it to you.
Definitely, thank you. Before I get started too much further, I appreciate everybody in allowing me to exist in my basement tonight, hiding from my 4-year-old daughter, who is likely going to be traipsing around the floor above me for a little bit. And so I apologize for the lighting and some of the setting, but I wanted to be able to deliver this training tonight for everybody. As Danielle had mentioned, I'm a clinical social worker here at the Madison VA Hospital. But we're not limited to Wisconsin. We cover the Rockford, Freeport areas. Boone, Stevenson, Ogle, and Winnebago counties is what we cover for Illinois. And so I've been working with Danielle for a few months now to coordinate suicide prevention activities for the area. And we decided to put on this training. And so she graciously was able to arrange CEUs for folks who need them. For everybody else, it'll be a nice warm pat on the back, hopefully, and give you a little bit of a permission maybe to ask a really tough question. And for me, I'm really comfortable with a lot of engagement throughout it. And so feel free to fill up the chat function. Feel free to do the raise hand feature. I'm not as familiar with that one. I'll try to notice it on my screen. But I really do want to have a lot of engagement, because I know that, really what we're trying to promote here is people connecting and communicating, and we can't do that if we don't engage. If at any point in time during our discussion tonight, anybody finds themselves overwhelmed or it's just a bit too much, leave us a message in the chat and just say, hey, I've got to go, so that we're not worried about you. But if you need to, the crisis line is available. The suicide prevention hotline is available. I can put those in the chat as well. We really want to promote those resources, because a lot of what I'll be asking you to do going forward after this training is to be able to engage with those resources with somebody who might be in crisis. As I pull up my slides and everything, I'll get that settled up, but I'm curious how many folks in here, either by show of hands or use of the chat, how many folks have some level of comfort in crisis or have dealt with somebody who has suicidal ideation or anything like that in the past? I see several hands. Wow. Excellent. This is gonna be a very rich group then. Erin, I don't think I see you. I see a photo. It's nice to at least put a name to a face. So Erin got to see me today, but I didn't get to see her. So I did a different training. Good. How many folks in here have served in the military or in the armed forces? Do we have anybody? Okay. And how many people know somebody who has served in uniform? Excellent. And that's what we're paring it down to. A lot of the new things that my job is kind of aiming to do is to identify not just the service member, not just the veteran, but also their families, because your odds are you're going to be one of the first lines of support that somebody does have. And before we get going, can everybody see my slides okay, or at least my screen over there? I see some heads nodding. And I'll disclose, I've got a bit of a funky setup. I told Danielle, and I'm in my basement, but this is where I actually run a podcast in my spare time. And so I've got like a big monitor over there I'm looking at, but we'll get it worked out. Cool, we're back to full screen. So I'll be looking around just a little bit, but as you can see, the VA S.A.V.E. training. Has anybody ever taken this training or is familiar with this particular model of gatekeeper training before? This might be a new one, okay. Good. That's okay. So to familiarize, I mean, I think it's pretty clear to understand why VA finds it important to do suicide prevention activities. One of the things that they've done at what a lot of people would argue is a world-class level is clinical suicide prevention, meaning what is happening in the hospital or once we've identified somebody in crisis. Those 4 people I've got listed there, Andrea, Shannon, Darlene, and Vicky. Vicky covers the Rockford area. They do phenomenal work. I'm kind of the new person been lumped into the mix. The VA not only wanted to provide clinical services, but based on their data, found that they also want to provide community-based services as well, because there's a lot of statistics out there. The common one known is 22 veterans die per day to suicide. The data shows that it's really around 17, but we're not going to argue over numbers because it's not zero yet. 11 of those people are not engaged in VA healthcare for whatever reason. They may choose to use their private insurance. They may not be in a priority group that makes it affordable for them or even possible for them, or they just may choose to get their healthcare elsewhere, and that's fine. But we want to be able to help those people. And so my job is to go out and offer this training, build coalition work. I do a lot of things at the state and federal level as well, so that we can try to reach those other 11 veterans and support them, because we know that for each person who dies by suicide, 135 people are affected, and we don't want or need that. We know that contagion effect, and I'm sure those are statistics many of you are used to, but I'm going to say them a lot of times because every time I say it, I even get chills. I think it's just profound how it affects people. As I mentioned, we do have the suicide prevention hotline there, 1-800-273-8255. If you're a veteran and want the crisis line, you just press 1 and they'll route you to that as well. You'll see there's a couple different ways. If you hop on to the NAMI website, I've listed some of the great crisis contacts that Danielle has listed there. But if you just simply type into your browser, crisis support, I'm having thoughts of suicide, all those browsers are tuned to be able to provide you the information you would need. And you can even chat with somebody through a chat function or even text messaging, trying to provide good avenues for everybody. And I have lost sight of the chat bar for some reason. So Danielle, if you do see anything, feel free to jump in and let me know.
I will do that.
Cool, let me see. Might be able to get it back. Got it back. Cool. Here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about some of the general objectives that we have when it comes to VA S.A.V.E. training, which again is similar to a QPR product, if people are familiar with that, Assist ACE. Maybe I'll even ask the group, has anybody, no, I'm seeing all this fun chat that I missed. Aaron and cheesy photo, good stuff. Has anybody undertaken another gatekeeper training in the past, whether it's QPR or Assist or ACE or any of the others? None in here. Okay. We have very similar paths to get where we're going. Everybody just wants a different acronym. And so the steps that we're going to learn today isn't just helpful for veterans, it's helpful for anybody. And so it's my opinion that anybody can benefit from this training. It's just that I'm going to use language centered around veterans because that's typically who we're providing care for. All right, here we go. I'm going to ask people, what's the biggest question you have when it comes to suicide and talking to people in crisis? What are folks curious about, or what kind of thoughts do you have? I know a common one I hear is that it's just a very difficult subject to bring up. And I'm curious what other thoughts or reservations folks might have. Feel free to unmute, use the chat box. Again, I'm pretty laid back with this stuff.
This morning when we were talking, this is Erin, by the way.
Yep.
This morning we were talking and we were talking about using particular language on social media and in other instances. And I thought, gosh, I have no idea what language that I may or may not be using in situations that may not be the right word choice or phraseology. So that would be something that I would be interested in knowing more about.
Yeah, for sure. We'll see how much we can get into tonight. Language could either be a 10-second topic or a 10-day topic.
Okay.
The big thing we want to do is just try to make the best choice that we can, to have the best intent that we can, instead of just maybe regurgitating some words that we're used to hearing. One of the common ones you hear is that somebody committed suicide. We don't want to use that form because they didn't commit a crime. They didn't break any laws or anything like that. They just made a choice to, they made a very permanent choice for usually what is a temporary problem, at least we find out. And so using language like that, We usually say that they died by suicide. Anything that sounds grotesque, typically try to avoid that. Bringing spotlights onto saying the person died because they had a mental health reason isn't always the total nuts and bolts of it, because there are plenty of people that don't have diagnosed mental health problems that are also dying by suicide. And so trying to not isolate it to one particular factor, and otherwise, celebrate the strengths of the person, as opposed to having the discussion teeter off into maybe more negative territory. And we'll get into a little bit, but then what I might do is I might include at the end, I'll send over to Danielle maybe for her to kick out, is the CDC has a really good guide. I highlighted that a bit in my talk this morning, but there's some good things, just some primers in one pagers you can read over, just to kind of say, what is this choice versus this choice? And I'll be able to kick those out if we're not able to get into it today. Good question. What else do we have? What other thoughts are we bringing to the table today?
Yeah, so I got one.
Yep.
So I know you got a prepared presentation, but I guess it would be based on your experience. What themes, what phrases, being in the business, do you look out for, other than I'm going to kill myself? What phrases, what types of things might raise a red flag in your mind that, okay, this something's really going on here, that sort of thing?
Yeah, that I know definitely we will cover in this presentation. But the one thing I usually say is that nobody is making a cry for help. These are all, treat all of this as the most rational, direct stuff. If somebody's starting to talk about dying, we need to go there quickly. We don't want to hesitate. If somebody's about to leave and say, oh, well, nobody will miss me anyways, come over and get my stuff after the Packers or the Bears lose and I'm sad, I won't be here anymore. Take that threat seriously. We take it all seriously. And at least the person might then understand the levity of that. If somebody may be joking around in that regard, we can at least establish the seriousness of this. And if they are having a bad time, and maybe that was just a little bit of them throwing something out there, but not wanting to be as direct, that's where I like the Wisconsin goodbye. Has anybody ever heard of the Wisconsin goodbye? It's a bit of a joke, but you say goodbye inside the house, you say goodbye at the doorway, you say goodbye on the walk out to the car, you say goodbye again at the car, you say goodbye, and then they finally honk as they wave, and then you make sure they text you when they get home. That's how long the Wisconsin goodbye lasts. You can hear it as the Minnesota goodbye, but really don't miss an opportunity. If you hear something, don't leave anything to go and just be like, well, hopefully it'll be okay, because we've interviewed plenty of survivors, and that's definitely a point where they wish they would have made a little bit of a different response. And nobody's going to be perfect, nobody's going to do it right every time, but really clue into that. And I'll demonstrate some language as we go through this training tonight about what can cue you in to when somebody's being serious about the topic. And I'll even offer some suggestions as to how to get there. I tend to keep things pretty I hate to say pretty real, but really just getting in there. As in a clinical setting, I previous to this job, I've been doing this job for about 9 months now. Previous to this, I worked for 2.5 to 3 years on mental health clinic as a clinician. And then 3.5 years prior to that, I did clinical case management for a homeless program here at the VA, which is a program people don't anticipate most hospitals have, but we do. And so usually it's, if I get any inclination that I hear anything that puts my ears up even a little, I'll be direct and I'll be like, you just kind of said that. Are you alluding to the idea of dying by suicide? Is that something you're really thinking about? And somebody will say, oh no, I'm sorry. And they'll backpedal and rephrase, or they'll say, yes. A lot of times it is that matter of fact. Thanks, David. Anybody else have any other thoughts or questions? All right, I'm going to show a quick video, and I don't know what my screen is doing right now. Let me know if my audio does play. Oh, we might have a Zoom problem here.
Adam,
Yep.
I just didn't know if you saw that last chat box question.
Jose's help.
Yep.
I will say after this training, I want you to believe that it will be, because I want to show you how to go from asking the question to validating somebody's thoughts and experience, to connecting with them, to then figuring out how to engage them with an appropriate resource. And I think we have a pretty good training, but the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention, I think, has something they've created that's maybe a little bit better because it demonstrates more examples. But really, if you sit down next to somebody and we establish that that's what is happening, and in fact that, you know, somebody was having some type of ideation, that really then we pull out our cell phone or their cell phone and we call together. The same way, you know, any salesperson would close any sale, that we don't want to let that person out the door without getting the resolution that we hope for. So, you know, Jose, I want you to tell me at the end of this if you feel like you're prepared enough, and we'll see where we go. Sometimes I even ask on a 0 to 10 scale. 0, we're not willing to engage at all, and 10, we think we could do it perfectly today. You know, I'd say if you want, either keep that number in your head and figure out if it's changed at all by the end of training. You're welcome to fill the chat box with the numbers where you feel like you're at. But, you know, a 0, I feel totally unprepared. 10, I feel perfectly prepared for what may come my way. Kind of a self-assessment tool just to see where we're at, because I don't expect anybody's going to move from a 0 to a 10. But if somebody goes from a 6 to a 7, we're looking pretty good. Even when I do goal setting, if somebody's sets a goal that they want to, you know, have an improved mood, first we figure out maybe there's so many days of the week that we're looking for that. Are we looking for 7 out of 7 days of the week that we feel really good? Or would we accept 2 right now? And that would make a manageable difference in our lives. Then maybe we set the goal at 2 and then we get to achieve a goal. Cool. All right. Do we want to up it to 4 now? And all the strategies that we built off that goal, are these things working, or do we alter them? Do we change them? I think a lot of it is very similar to our lives where, you know, we try to adjust it at appropriate intervals. I know back when I learned land navigation in the Army, every 100 meters, I was rechecking my compass to see where I was at. And I try to keep that same line of thinking when it comes to a lot of what I do and when it comes to goal setting. Zoom is different. Okay. So I'm not going to spend much time on this, but I would say if you're somebody who wants to really dig into the literature when it comes to suicide as it relates to veterans, that the VA produces a pretty robust annual report every year. You'll see down at the bottom, there is a link for that, but you can also type into Google and just say VA annual report on suicide. The one that I have linked here, as of about 3 o'clock today, is no longer effective because the 2021 annual report was released this afternoon. It's 17 pages, so it's not a whole lot, but it's got some good data points and some pretty promising data points. I'll go over some of those today. And then as the new information that I'm privy to comes, I'll make sure to add those little snippets of information in as we cover some of these slides. The main thing is that we're looking at the 2005 to 2018 data. The hard part about suicide prevention is our data has quite a bit of a lag. And so 2 to 3 years is very normal lag for data. And so even with the new coalition that was recently established in the Rockford area for suicide prevention, you know, we might not even know if what we're doing for another 3 years to see if there has been an effect. And that can be tough. And so you'll see in my discussion, we'll have little anchors of hope that we tend to cling on to. Okay. It's sensitive on my mouse here. Okay, so suicide is a national issue. It's a public health issue. I don't know if people have heard that language discussed before. That there may be higher rates among veterans, but this is still an issue with the general population as well. It's not just isolated to veterans on the whole. That the interventions that we create in the community typically lift everybody up, so we try to seek those out. Especially if folks aren't engaging with a lot of veteran-related or veteran-centric services. Additionally, we know that the economics, the finances factor in pretty heavily here. We know that as a VA, we tend to take folks that maybe don't have private insurance or don't have a lot of income. So then we're getting maybe a more concentrated mass of people who have financial instability. We know that if somebody the demographics come into play, whether it's racial demographics, whether it's somebody's sexual orientation or preference, how they want to be identified, all that does factor into play. And therefore, as we build these teams and as we develop these targeted approaches, we do want to make sure that we're using the data as we do that. And we'll go over some of that. If somebody is homeless, they likely have an increased risk. That is definitely a risk factor, the housing instability. We know that if somebody's socially disconnected or isolated, that's also a big thing. And I can imagine that might be one of the more common ones. And so as we start to think of like, is it time for a conversation? If somebody who normally shows up for football on Sunday doesn't respond to messages, then maybe it's time for us to dig a little deeper, that we want to check into that. Or if somebody's consistently missing stuff, staying at home and isolating. I'd mentioned the 1 in 35 statistic. And then, we've got this combination of clinical and community, and I'll tap into that more as I have. I've already introduced the idea that we've got our clinical folks, and then we've got me in the community, and that we're trying to do both at the same time, because if we do, we're actually creating a public health approach. And the World Health Organization has created a very good manual on that we've borrowed from that, as well as the CDC's manual that they've prepared. The CDC's been tapped into this for quite a long time. And instead of recreating the wheel, we've definitely adopted a lot of their best practices when it comes. And this training is one of them, is helping get as many people as possible trained in this and developing a level of comfort with asking a very difficult question. Some interesting data points in the top right, you'll see that's where I referenced the 17.6 number. But again, I don't argue on that because the data is changing every year. There's a lot of people branded on 22 a day, and the reality is we want 0. And so until we get below 10, then I think that we still have a lot of work to do. The VA has had a target to reduce that number by 20% by the year 2025. It's ambitious, but I think it's achievable. And so we'll see how they do. In the bottom right, that probably is one of the tougher statistics for me, is that nearly 70% of veterans who die by suicide are using firearms to do it. We know that the veteran community enjoys firearm culture. As I've disclosed, I'm a veteran myself. I hunt and do all those things. You wouldn't see the stuff I've got on the wall behind me without it. And so as opposed to trying to oppose that, we're trying to change the language and create programs that do support it and support the communities to look after each other. And so hopefully I can even sneak in some information on some additional projects that should be working towards Rockford's way pretty quickly, actually. And is everybody in Rockford, or is there anybody out in some small towns? Feel free to fill up the chat if you want to, be more specific. I grew up in Pecatonica, Illinois, and so I am familiar with the area quite a bit, even though I grew up on a gravel road in the middle of nowhere. But it was awesome for a young kid. Some different data points. When we think of down in Oregon, I used to manage the Route 64 U store, that storage place over there. I used to eat lunch at Scoops when it was there, which is delicious. And I used to manage that motocross track in Byron. But that top left data point, for women veterans, they are dying by suicide at a rate of 2.2 times greater than non-veteran women. That is an incredibly hard number to digest. That the women, typically when they join the military, not typically, but there's a lot of experiences they can have that can negatively impact them throughout the rest of their lives, whether it's through military sexual trauma, etc. We know that chronic pain is a big risk factor for suicide. There's a lot of issues in early initial entry training with hip injuries and shin injuries as folks adapt to the high mileage and whatnot. And so we know that those are definitely things we're concerned about. As far as the male, 1.3, it's not a big number, but we do know there is an increase. There's some other graphs that'll show the disparity a lot greater and really speak to that. Looking at these kind of middle two here, the 18 to 34 and the 55 and older, in the 55 and older group, that's, your Vietnam and kind of post-Vietnam eras, that there's a greater number of folks in that era that die by suicide. There are some things that are age-related and whatnot that fit that as well. But we also know that our younger generation, 18 to 34, there is a greater rate, meaning, per 1,000, there's a higher number compared to the older generation, 55 and older. And so that's concerning for us, that we're seeing that as some of these younger veterans in this post 9/11 landscape, their transitions are incredibly harder. And, we're trying to figure out what we can do there. And again, we've got that firearm statistic. It's pushing right up against 70%. It has increased slightly since the last annual report. Does anybody have any questions about these data points that I've pulled up here? Any thoughts on that? I know it can be a tough one to take in at times. And I'll flip slides, but I'll respond to anything put in the chat bar as well. So you can see here, divided by the gender there, identified gender when it's just a binary thing. You can see the difference in the male and female there. And then as well, you can track the rates for different ages. And so you can see that one that peaks up at the end on the right-hand slide. There's just been a massive statistical change since 2010 that we're seeing a rising group of numbers. And we can do a lot of analysis on this, but I think very common sense wise, we've been at war for a long time. And 2009 was one of the worst years that we had overseas when it comes to loss of life and intensity. And that as those folks came out and readjusted, that there was just a lot to deal with as folks reintegrated. Looking against the veteran population here, this slide doesn't show as much for the veterans, but it really shows the difference. This is one of those things I want to say that there is hope. And I think that anybody who's survived a traumatic experience would know that you develop resilience. Resilience is a wonderful thing. We all want to have resilience. The challenge is there's only one way to get it. You don't get to go to Walmart and buy it. You have to earn it. And that if we get through these experiences, we can develop that resilience, and then we're better off for it. And so a lot of these folks have experienced stuff, they're better for it. The challenge is, how we get there. And so we find that veterans are pretty resilient. We have VA hospitals across the nation. We have programs that are adapting every single year. And so we have some hope there that we're doing okay. We're not experiencing the same difficulties as the non-veteran sector, the general population, because that rate is increasing to grow, at a rate that's not sustainable. That'll have to have some change there. And so my hopes tonight is, again, we all get a little bit better, and then maybe we can turn your eyes to some different opportunities out there and different ways to be effective for folks. Looking at some of the different methods or means that some people choose to use to die. And that, again, the one that sticks out to me is in the firearm category, the percentage of veteran suicide deaths, that it's incredibly difficult. You'll see that the majority of firearm use is with the males. Women are going with some other different methods, poisoning and suffocation. And so there's less challenge with that. I think that you'll see typically two things done. We'll find ways to store firearms safer, or we'll find programs to return medications to pharmacies. Those are some of the bigger lethal means safety pieces, is that we don't need to have somebody have, these crazy amounts of medications that sometimes can happen. And I'm not sure how it is for the general population, but on the VA side, they'll just keep kicking them out. And you can really store up quite a bit of excessive medication at times. So in combination with that last slide, with that 69%, 70% statistic, the challenge that I see is on the right half of this slide, you're going to see how fatal the attempts can be. That any other method, 5% fatal. Firearms are 85 to 90% fatal. And so it makes sense that there's a concentration. You'll see a lot of us in the field, though, we don't want to wait until that last, I don't want to wait until somebody comes into the emergency department to finally ask that question, because we're way too late to the game if somebody has firearms. If somebody's working with a mental health provider, or if their family knows if they have them, we could have that discussion well ahead of time about what we might do if these ever, we're at a risk and need to get them out of the home. We have gun locks. I've convinced a lot of our suicide prevention coordinators to purchase ammo boxes that are lockable, because it's not realistic if somebody has a good collection that they're not going to be able to lock off and secure all their firearms. So it's possible that maybe we can just lock up the ammunition instead. That might be okay, a good enough solution. Looking over at the left-hand side of this slide, that's the time factor. The two things we try to do is time and space, or you might hear time and distance. So we can increase space or distance by securing things better, and we can increase a little bit of time by anything else we do. So if you sit down with somebody and distract them and chat for an hour, you might have pushed away that impulse. And at that point, that person might no longer have that ideation that they had previously. And we know that. So any engagement is better in that, within an hour, that can be pretty risky there. Here's a tough slide to chew on. I wish it were easy to find the root cause of anything. In our landscape today, we have plenty of cannon fodder, whether it be politics, social issues, anything. We've got plenty of stuff that we can say, well, that's because of this, and make very quick judgments. And, a lot of times we're probably not that inaccurate. The challenge that we find here with suicide is that it's very difficult to isolate, and we don't get opportunities. If somebody did die by suicide, we don't get the opportunities to go back and talk to them, that we have to talk to families, folks who do survive attempts, then we can engage them and find out more. But this is a tough one. It's usually just a combination of risk and protective factors. And so if we can't reduce the risk, we'll try to increase the protective side. I don't know if these slides have it, but I had a slide this morning, and it talks about how marriage is a protective factor. And I think that is hilarious when we think of marital stress and things like that, if we're going to find a little fun, because we think of marriage as can be a source of stress and things like that. But really, ultimately, it's a very positive thing for somebody to have in their life. And we want to have as many of those as we can. Take a second and review these. These are the most common risk and protective factors. And we've got some identified. And again, you're trying to clear off the risk side, and you're trying to beef up the protective side the best you possibly can. And so if we can't do anything about a legal or financial stressor, then let's look over to the right side and see what else can we do for our emotional well-being. Maybe it's time to go fishing. Maybe it's time to get out of the house and go for a walk. We've got to figure out where we have the control and where we don't have the control. And then the same rules apply if we're helping somebody else, is to maybe they ask them, hey, this thing that's stressing you out, how much control do you have right now in this moment? Maybe not a lot. Well, do we have control in something else? Can we try to get some good sleep? Can we try to go eat a healthy meal together? Can we find something else we can do? That we want to build that side out the best that we can. As we look at this, does anybody have any questions, thoughts, or concerns? So some of the anchors of hope that I mentioned, these are the things that we know we haven't gotten there yet, but we're trying to find some inkling to keep us moving along. And so some of these different ones that from 2017 to 2018, that veterans involved in VHA care, we know that suicide rates declined. If we get a chance to be helpful, we know that it works. I think commonsensically, if people are able to get some level of connection, they're better for it. As far as folks from 2005 to 2018, folks with depression, anxiety, and substance use disorders actually experienced a decrease in the rate. It goes against a lot of the common thinking, is that somebody died by suicide because they had an untreated mental health issue. While that sometimes is the case, that isn't always the case. They could have gone through their entire lives without any diagnosis being made, whether they were kind of silently treating depression or anxiety state with a substance. They were just managing and coping fairly well up until a point, or they really just didn't meet criteria diagnostically to get diagnosed. That we don't want to necessarily pick on that too much. Again, for specific populations, if you're engaged in VA, it goes down. The rate wasn't really changing at a great rate, and there's a lot of really, we look out the turnout for this particular group. Danielle and I were putting this together a few weeks ago, and I had a schedule snafu that kind of had me bump things out. But this already shows there's people that are very interested in this particular problem, and that people want to help, and that we're noticing that. And the more that we engage with folks at every level, from the national level all the way down to all of us just sitting around in our homes, that we can get somewhere. And so we're trying to leverage that the best that we can. That's a lot of the efforts that I do in my job, is how can I engage communities and municipalities to be able to do a little bit more, and maybe not do more work, but do more strategic or efficient work in the way that we do it. What do we think about this slide? Now I want to hear the honest truth. Somebody could say, yes, I believe it. Somebody can say it's complete BS. I want to hear everything in between.
So I got one on that.
Let's hear it, David.
My last training in this actually was when I was in the Army. I'm a 30-year Army guy. And we had a commanding general that was, it wasn't going to happen on his watch. So whenever something did happen, as a commander, you had to explain why you didn't prevent it. And it got to be pretty ridiculous, but, we had to have AARs and that sort of thing. I think I like the idea of your risk and protective measures. I don't think you can prevent 100% anybody that's going to do what they're going to do. I think that it's a balance. Um, and going back to the other slide that you had, which I thought was really good, I actually took a picture of it in my phone. That go forward, please. Stop. Back. That one. So to me, more than anything else, living in a family with a family member who's mentally ill and very challenging. The thing that is challenging to me is how I keep him active. So for me, activity is extremely important, especially to people that are very depressed, bipolar people. When they're busy, seem to be just way better. But the challenge is they get so depressed at times they don't want to do anything, and so just to get them to do something is a trick.
Yeah.
So I think you have to. I think activity and sense of mission or purpose on the right hand side, physical health, just trying to get somebody to go to the gym, um, and keeping a job, which is extremely difficult with uh, some mentally ill people because nobody wants them around. But more than anything else, activity. So anyway, I'm babbling, but no, I don't think it's preventable. I think you have to. Uh, it's a risk analysis, and I think that the more protective measures you have in place, you get ahead of it. Um, and unless you're a really good counselor and talker, if somebody wants to do what they're going to do, really wants to do what they're going to do, you're fighting an uphill battle. I guess that was a long response, but those are my thoughts, sir.
No, I appreciate it. You know, a little bit of a joke at the end. You definitely don't have to call me sir. I'll reserve that for my father. Um, the one thing that I think was good that I'll take from that is the idea that there's nuance and that there's a lot of things at play. And as opposed to it being a light switch that's on or off, or even like a dimmer switch, I think we can add more to it. That if we could imagine a graph, like you'd imagine if you sat in any math class, the dot can be moved around all over the place. And we're trying to push it down into the idea that it's at zero, no matter how much effort that may take. Um, but we know that can be hard. Another thing I like to think of is just the simple upstream downstream analogy is, you know, the dam and the river is where somebody's in crisis. How far up the river can we go to keep that person to where they can find another river chain to take that might avoid that dam or some of those challenging opportunities, to where if we can take a longitudinal look at somebody's life and where can we go back and find where we could have made a difference here and avoided a lot of the other stuff that comes off of that. Again, I think like when you think of your young soldier, if you fix their pay problem well ahead of when it could have drug out for, and they do have cash in their pocket, they can pay their bills, they might be okay. But if this starts to tailor out of hand and all of a sudden they become a problem for their unit, they've got a bunch of people spying around every single day, and now all of a sudden this person's identified as being somebody that can't manage funds, and it just continues to roll. And then we see at the very end what went wrong. Oh, CQ was out for a walk that day, or there was nobody on the grounds, and that's the ultimate problem. But a good root cause analysis, we're going to walk it back as far as we can and go as far upstream as we can. And so everybody in the room today, we're going to talk about what crisis might look like, but I also want us to be thinking of how far upstream can we go? If I mean, it could be something as simple as holding the door for somebody at the gas station. That might, you never know the effect that might have in somebody's day. And how can we stay and get upstream as far as we can for some of these prevention measures? If I could have any type of, if you don't mind if I make any criticism, when it comes to language, I'll be reinforcing language that if we've got a way that we're identifying somebody, take those words and put them after the person part. So an example for person first language I would say is, if a person had mental illness, I wouldn't say like a mentally ill person. I would say a person with mental illness. So we're always putting the person first and prioritizing that, because if you look at somebody that either has bipolar disorder, depression, schizophrenia, etc., and you say, hey, you're a schizophrenic, that's really all they get to be. And if we say, hey, you have that, and that's a thing where if you take your medication and have a good lifestyle set up, that's you can mitigate that. You can manage that condition. And so just even those little like nuances in language can really be impactful in the long run. And if we think that we don't have to be perfect at the end, but we walk it back and get some of this stuff right, then we're doing okay. The last thing I'll comment on is it sounds like that general officer who made the decision to rub the dog's nose in the poop. And I don't know if anybody's had a dog before. I've never gotten my dog to not poop in the house by rubbing its nose in it. I've never been able to shame an animal into compliance. I've been able to be curious and compassionate to motivate folks to maybe make some changes. And that's hard. One of the skill sets that I think is folks here. I don't know how many folks, again, we got about, I think, half the room served. You know, it's a big shift to go from a military mindset to a civilian mindset and to be able to make that reintegration appropriately. It's a different set of soft skills and language that, you know, I hope everybody's always working on. And in the same respect, folks that maybe didn't serve, if you hear folks like David or I or anybody else ever come across as crass, you know, our intentions aren't that. Maybe we just, you know, had some word choice that we're just used to. The same goes if you hear somebody say committed suicide, you know, be careful. You know, do we have to fix this now, or is this something we can kind of poke at in private as well? Good stuff. I see Aaron's contribution. Aaron, do you want to just let me read it aloud, or do you want to unmute and go for it yourself?
Oh, you can go ahead.
So thinking that suicide is preventable, thinking that the challenge becomes getting somebody who's determined to isolate, to re-engage, and taking persistence in people who are in tune with the individual. Yeah. And really, it's like, you know, you can be really emotionally intelligent and you can be very attuned to people. I know my daughter unlike anybody else. My neighbor doesn't know my daughter like I do. I can be terribly attuned to her, but if I don't ask the question, it's a moot point. And so, you know, anytime that we get any signal, the next step is to be able to engage and be able to ask something and get in there. Anybody else have anything else they want to share as it relates? I'm going to find our original slide here if I can. Oh, here we go. Any last thoughts on that statement? See, Sean's got something here. Agree and getting help. Been through the, yep. So in touch with the VA psychologist or therapist does work. There's worse cases than yours, sure. And feeling very empathetic for any person military related to having suicidation or words. Yeah, it's tough. I think that, you know, clearly if you get your car into the shop, it's going to get better care. It's going to get great care. And so I think there's a lot of folks that people might be ambivalent to engaging with the healthcare system. It could be fear, you know, from a firearm standpoint, there's a lot of myths and misunderstandings about what could happen to a firearm if somebody does seek mental health care. And so knowing the rules and regulations well enough, and hopefully clinicians do as well, to where that we can understand. I know in the state of Wisconsin, I can't speak as much for the nuance to Illinois, is that if somebody is voluntarily seeking help, it's fine. If somebody's involuntarily committed due to something that happens and a judge approves that, well, that changes the nature of things. And so, you know, just because you come forward and say, hey, I'm having thoughts and I'm depressed, doesn't instantly mean there's going to be a lot of ramifications in your life. In fact, it could be the best thing that ever happened to you by getting engaged with some of those helping systems, you know, coming clean with family and friends and saying, hey, you know, you guys may have noticed, but I've been dealing with a bit of depression for the last year, you know, to be able to say that and say, here's what you'll maybe notice from me if things aren't going well. Here's what generally works for me. I might not be able to do it myself. I might actually need you to come be helpful, but this is what I know so far. And we're always learning and getting better. And so the better you get to know yourself, you know, help others along too. If we expect that they can read our minds and read ourselves, you know, I think that we're being a little unfair to our part of the relationship or the equation. And so nice job, Sean. I appreciate you sharing all that. And the nuance between the active duty military situation and the veteran. And if anybody encounters anybody that's in the Guard, Reserves, or active status that, you know, coming forth with a mental health symptom, there's a lot of fear that it could alter and affect your career in a negative way. And we want to figure out how to be realistic and compassionate for that. There are some things that maybe the best path is that the military part of life is done and we're trying to transition into something new. It could be just that getting in with a care provider could actually make you better in your career. And you know, hopefully you have a chain of command that supports that. All right, looking at some of these different common myths. Here's one of our myths here. So no matter how casually or jokingly said, I had mentioned this earlier, that suicide threats should never be ignored and may indicate serious suicidal feelings. Someone who talks about suicide provides others with an opportunity to intervene before it occurs. You know, what are some of the thoughts here? I've already gone on a bit of a monologue on this one, so I can imagine
I often run into people that I work with that share things with me, confidentially, and I always want to, honor that confidentiality. But I also don't have a problem sometimes reaching out to somebody else that's in a place that they could offer me advice or some guidance, or that may share the fears on this person, and maybe say, hey, you know what, I just want you to know that, I've been just feeling concerned about this person, without going into any, specifics or anything. And then that kind of puts that on somebody else's radar, so that you start building kind of a village of people that are just kind of watching out for the person, if that makes sense.
totally makes sense. I mean, geez, in a clinician role, I learned a handy tip or tidbit that has made my personal life a lot easier. I learned how to ask for permission. And what I would do is say, hey, you shared with me some pretty heavy stuff. Do you mind if I go ahead and I reach out to maybe somebody who's better equipped to deal with this? Can I help you get connected? Or it would be, hey, this sounds like it's pretty heavy. Are you having thoughts of suicide? If the answer is no, you could say, man, when would I know that it's time for me to do something drastic? What would I notice in you? And if I see it, then I have permission to go for it. A lot of times, some of that just discussion can really be handy. And somebody might say, you know what, I'm just kind of venting. And you could say, okay, please let me know though. And can we also put this phone number in your phone just in case it ever gets real and we can't reach somebody?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent examples. What about this one? That the only person that can be helpful is the clinician.
Disagree completely.
I concur.
Sean, were you saying that you agree with that statement, or you were concurring with Aaron?
I agree.
Go ahead.
For the first time here. I just have been through a lot myself, not as much as others I've noticed. And I like Aaron's outlook. And I believe there's hope for anybody who's going through crisis of any situation, military or not. Hopelessness is a terrible thing to feel. And I think people in that situation just need to be heard.
I agree with the people in that situation just need to be heard. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And so, when I see this, I see a myth that you don't have to get a trained clinician involved. Really, people have gone on for years upon years successfully supporting each other through life. And that, how long have we had licensed and certified counselors and therapists? Not for that long of the existence of, of how long we've been there. So it's my hope to empower you all today to be able to be the supports, because, not everybody even meets criteria to get in with a mental health person, unless it comes to a crisis point, and hopefully we can get ahead of it. I feel like this skipped a few things for me. So let me see what else as I'm clicking here. Okay. Very similar to kind of the theme we've been showing here. The cat's out of the bag a little bit here, but this is the reality, that special training is not required to raise the topic of suicide and talk on it. That including folks, being genuine, heartfelt, that can make a huge difference. That if I've done anything in my clinical career that's set me up to be successful as a therapist, I've been curious. That's it. I've asked questions. I've gotten to know people. I've really tried to understand their problem from their point of view, not the way I interpret it. I may have ideas for solutions that may work for them. They might not have a care in the world about my thoughts. They might have a different way that they want to approach that problem. And if it seems feasible, let's do it. And so I think if anybody has the capacity for genuine heartfelt support, you're in the game. All right, what is SAVE? We'll break it down. So again, it's an acronym. Usually this is where a lot of veterans are like, yay, the thousandth acronym that I've gotten to memorize. But again, we need mnemonic devices to be able to remember these. Similar to other trainings, they're built on these tools, but again, it gets you to the same result. So first, what do we see that's going to be recognizable to help us know that we have to go there? We got to go there. We got to ask the question. And we don't say, I'll throw this out there because it wasn't addressed yet. One of the things that we don't want to say is, are you thinking of harming yourself? Are you thinking of hurting yourself? No, that's not at all. I was thinking of full-blown dying by suicide. And that might be matter of fact. And so ask the question for the answer you're looking for. Let's try not to veil it in politeness. Let's try not to be afraid. When I was way back in my graduate school program, I took my crisis intervention class with a gentleman named Jay Callahan at Loyola. And he literally wrote the textbook that we were learning from. And he was a big proponent of the idea of ask the simplest, cleanest question to get the answer you're really asking for. Just do that. Are you having thoughts of suicide? It really doesn't get any better than that. You may want to set it up and frame it in a different way. So you might want to warm the question up. Thanks, Mike. Let me put my information in the chat bar here, because if anybody has to leave for whatever reason, don't feel like you can't reach out. If I'm happy to get on the phone and chat with you for a half hour about this, if that's what it takes. But looking at asking the question, ask the question that you want to get the answer for and be direct. You can say, hey, lately I've noticed this. Lately you've said this. Therefore, are you thinking of suicide? You might have some different ways that you want to soften it and warm somebody up to the idea instead of just hitting them with the question. But we generally, when we get to what we want to ask, we want to be pretty precise. Validating their experience. Has anybody heard the word validate used in that context before? I used to live out in Los Angeles after the military.
Yes. Validation is very important.
And validations, if you can validate why somebody's doing what they're doing, that's impactful. If you can get into why, hey, your life's been stressful. Your spouse left you 6 months ago. COVID's been an issue. Man, you have got to be under some stress right now. Even just being able to make an assumption or even a suggestion like that is pretty validating, because somebody might say, wow, I really never even slowed down to think about it. And you might have just let a huge weight off that person's shoulders. And then finally, how to encourage treatment and expedite getting help. I think that's the one that a lot of times we overthink it, that we're trying to look for some really amazing solution. But at the end of the day, if we just get on the phone and call somebody and make a kind of a hasty plan, a lot of times that can be, as good as any clinical response. Go ahead and take a second, review these signs right here, and then we'll kind of, we'll chat about them. Things I'll be curious is if it seems like it makes sense, or if there's any that you agree wholeheartedly with or disagree with.
So, Adam, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Loud and clear.
All right. So this is just my personal experience. What I deal with is a person who is mentally ill, who likes to bring a lot of attention to himself, and oftentimes says, yep, I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to kill myself. So how many times are we going to go through this today, this week, this month? And I think a lot of it is an attention getter to the point of, I'm going to kill myself. Okay, let's call, the cops, and let's call, a couple trips to the hospital and all of that. So I think in that situation, when it's a repeated attention getter, and the thing is, you never know. That's what's scary. But you see trends, people, just like you say, your daughter. I know this guy. I think the signs can speak louder than the words in many cases. And when you know that person, if you know that person, then you can see trends in behavior, which would make me more concerned than if you really got a gut feel that it's just an attention getter. you know. So it's a it almost turns into a more of an art than science when you look at this. That's my gut. We had a I'm also a Gold Star family member. I had a son-in-law that did some really bad things to my daughter and then killed himself when he got back from Iraq. So we've been through it. And most of that were signs that at the time were not recognized. So that's sort of my 2 cents um, on that slide.
Well, wouldn't it be easier if it was as benign as some of these signs that are listed here, and not something that's, it sounds like the experience you're getting is somebody's yelling fire in the movie theater and expecting to see everybody run. But it's challenging, and so um, you've definitely got a road ahead of you. If I could offer any suggestion, I mean, do you mind if I make a suggestion just offhand without knowing much about it?
I'll take all the suggestions I can get. I've been living with this for a while, and I don't see it going away anytime soon, sir.
There's
I know you
there's
don't like to be called sir, but if I didn't call people sir, my mother would bat my ears. So
fair enough. I'll allow it then, because I don't want to make your mom angry. Um, one of the hard parts is, I think, if somebody's trying to, if the engagement's like that, a lot of times that um, one of the person who maybe makes a statement like that will know that it does make you react in a certain way, and that when somebody's really out of control in a situation, they're going to find ways to gain control back. And the same way that when we did a cordon and knock, that we brought 3 to 1, they're going to want to do the same thing. And for folks that maybe don't understand all that jargon, is that we're going to want to make sure we're heard. And so we're going to go as big and extreme as we have to in order to get our needs met in this scenario. And one of our most basic impulses in humans is to have some level of control over our life. That's why teenagers act the way they act, is because they don't have a lot of control over their lives. And they're starting to have some interest in having control over their lives. Same with toddlers. Toddlers are doing the same thing. So from a human development time span, that makes sense. And so, anybody else at any point in time can have that kind of stuff happening. And so, my big thing would maybe be just to offer you to try something radically different and radically accept it as it is. And, instead of it becoming what sounds like probably a family tension moment, instead to sit with it and say, whoa, all right, ooh, oh, I'm sorry, that, not the direction we want to go. Can we chill out and really talk about this calmly? Can we agree that we're going to talk on calm terms and say, hey, all right, we don't want you to have that. I don't want you to throw that at me. What else can we do differently together, so that really calms down the power and control dynamics? And that's taken it a bit further. I'd say really, like, get into a family therapist if you can, because they're probably going to have more ways to do it. But I think a lot of times we have to walk back and talk about power and control. And that if somebody's risk factors are that they have limited control in their life right now, they're not going to see a lot of reason to engage in it. They're not going to have their own genuine sense of purpose that's for them, especially if outside influences are the ones telling them what their purpose could or should be, or ways that they could feel better. It's got to really drive from that human, and it's a radically different change to get comfortable doing that, which is where I think a lot of therapists and clinicians do get their credit, is that they're comfortable going there early. And so, good luck with that, David. I think, I'm glad you're here, and, I hope things do get better for you. I see Sean's hand up.
Yes, I have a response from Mr. Dragger if he's interested. So
yeah, maybe less than a minute. I'm seeing the time drag out here, and I don't want to be disrespectful. I was given a 60 to 90 minute window, if I remember right.
10 seconds.
There you go.
The person you're dealing with, have you had them in intensive outpatient or intensive inpatient therapy?
In and out all his life. It's an ongoing thing. It's difficult. We have future psychiatrists and counselors and caseworkers laid on, but he's had all of it other than a caseworker all his life, in and out of mental institutions all his life, special schools, never been able to mainstream. Very difficult, but it's just, we work with it, and we're just doing everything we can to keep him off the street at this point. So it's difficult. It's complicated. He's got professional people that help us. But I guess all I was saying, and I appreciate your input, Sean. Thank you, because that tells me you care. So thank you for that. Yeah, it's just all what I was getting at was based on the slide. I think at times, to sum it up, the signs speak louder than the words. That's what I wanted to say.
Airborne.
Here, Bubba.
And definitely
Here,
look for those
Bubba.
the actions and the words. You know, when you've got congruence, cool, but when they're incongruent, they're different. We want to try to figure out where to look and what people are doing. And, you know, past behavior is indicative of future behavior. Sure, people have the potential for change, but that's a safe place to start usually, as long as we're doing it with a healthy level of compassion. Um, when I look at this slide, and I am going to keep us moving along a little bit here, but when I look at this particular slide, one of the ones that I see that I think of, especially with the Midwest, is the increased substance use or alcohol use. That, again, remember, I grew up in the area of Rockford, you know, Madison's not that far away, that there, you know, this is a part of the country that predominantly people are using substances uh, at larger rates than the rest of the general population across the rest of the country. And so really, if you see a change in somebody's substance use behavior, if they're drinking more, if they're being reckless and coming home from the bar, if they're using substances, um, if they've never used and are starting, or if they're starting to use things that we'd consider harder substances, you know, these are all behaviors that are worth checking in with people and saying, hey, I've noticed this. What's up? What's going on with you? Are you all right?
One thought.
Go ahead, Sean.
If the person has military experience at all, they need to get in touch with help. If they don't, for civilians, it's very hard for me to relate to civilians, but I know that their trauma is just as real, if not worse, than or equivalent to what we endure as soldiers. I lost my thought, but I just want to help. If they have military experience, if they've been in the military, there's so many resources there, and I joined this meeting because it's you know, it's veteran specific. SAVE. Thank you for explaining that. It's a good acronym, and I'll apply it.
Yeah, I think one of the pieces in there that I will respond to is that there are a lot of resources for veterans. And so, you know, hopefully we can encourage veterans to access those resources as they're available, and that we can improve the rest of our resources based on it. Like I said, the VA does good clinical suicide prevention. And so part of our push in the next 1 to 5 years is to go to other healthcare systems and try to bring them up to the same continuity that we're currently able to offer, whether it's just in choosing the right modalities to offer, process improvement measures. That we do have a suicide risk management program that's kind of a consultative program that healthcare systems and outpatient clinics can have access to. And I'll try to remember to put a snippet of that at the end as well. Or if anybody thinks that's of interest to you, put something in the chat, so at least I have a little bit of a prompt. If anybody hears these signs or sees anything like this, though, this requires urgent attention. It's not just noticing like an increase in anxiety or an increase in substance use. If somebody really is thinking about hurting or killing themselves, we have to act immediately. If somebody's looking for ways to die, if you see somebody looking up some things that are a bit odd in their search history or anything like that you come across, if people are talking about it, or if you see some of these self-destructive or risk-taking behaviors, if somebody's never owned a firearm and then all of a sudden goes and makes a purchase, what's going on there? What's with that? I can't say that I love and support some of the firearm legislation that exists for the state of Illinois. However, I don't think they did it willy-nilly. There's maybe some purpose to it. And so, accepting maybe some of the good with the bad or some of the trade-offs that exist, from the community, they're going to say, we don't like a 7-day ban. Everybody who doesn't experience intimate partner violence or suicide, they're going to say, well, we support the 7-day ban. And so, each side probably has some stake in the game and usually some rationale for how they got there. But looking at those kinds of things, because if somebody start to make some of those bigger moves in life, we do want to check in with it if it seems a little different or off or odd or eccentric. Any of that we want to tune into. Here it is. Here's the part I'm really going to focus this in on, if anything, just to inspire you and help you feel more comfortable with it, is knowing how to ask the most important question of all. Any thoughts there?
Are you having any thoughts of hurting yourself?
And we'll
Any.
want to, that's a phrase that probably comes to our mind, but I would say I would encourage you to jump to the phrase that I've got on the PowerPoint slide is let's be a little more direct, right? Somebody doesn't want to hurt themselves. In fact, they're tired of hurting. They don't want to hurt anymore. The solution they've come up with is to stop hurting. Do I want to hurt myself? No, not at all. And then we'll think, all right, we asked, cool, right? And so I'm hoping to inspire folks and give you the confidence to be able to ask the most direct, hard to ask question and telling you, I've seen this from multiple perspectives that you'd be surprised the reaction you get. You might give somebody a load of relief because you're the first person who's really noticed how difficult things are for them. That you're the first person to understand how extreme the circumstances are, how bad things are. Nobody else has noticed. Nobody else cares about me. Everybody else is going about their lives as if I don't exist. You're the first person who really asked me if I'm thinking of dying. And if somebody's not, they'll correct you quickly. I'm telling you, if you share misinformation, somebody will try to correct you. That's the fastest way to get the right answer out of anybody is to propose the wrong result, right? And this is a good way to get there as well with this question. Does anybody still have any reservations about this particular question?
Yeah, kind of.
Let's hear it. Aaron, go for it.
I don't know. I mean,
if I'm so fast.
If I'm being really honest, I'm really uncomfortable with that. And maybe it's totally illogical, but there's some level in me that's like, if that person isn't already thinking about it, maybe I just gave them the idea. I don't know. I don't know. It's just a really uncomfortable question that it sounds like I need to get comfortable with.
Hey, Aaron, tomorrow, are you thinking about going out and buying a brand new Corvette?
I wasn't, but I am now. No, I'm not.
We can tear that one apart. And it's so like I'm being facetious in that. But I just wanted to kind of highlight the idea that, there's no point in time that you're putting the idea in somebody's head.
Yeah, on some level I know that, but yeah.
It's hard. We don't want that, right? This is how bad we don't want it. We're willing to give up our dinner time in order to sit in here and listen to me yak at you for a bit and how to get better at this. That's how seriously we're taking this. We're training ourselves.
It's a big deal.
It is a big deal. And so figuring out how we can be it. And Diana brings up a good point that being too direct can scare folks off. I would rather err on the side of being too direct than not direct enough. But then I think when, like she mentions, hitting the protective factors, lead with the protective and risk factors that you notice. You can say, hey, I noticed that you're spending more time with your daughter. I noticed that you're starting to work out again. And I noticed before that, these were the things that I saw. And, it seems like maybe you're doing better now, but at that point in time, were you having thoughts of killing yourself at any point in time? Is it that extreme, or maybe help me understand is even a great way. I think is if you could count how many times I say, help me understand in a therapy session, your clicker will be going off. Because I may be able to understand family dynamics and relationships, but I really need to understand how this is playing out for you, that every individual is the expert in their own lives. And the faster we can respect that and get there, we're doing really good. And I appreciate Aaron's, willingness to be vulnerable out here. I think that's excellent to model that this is risky stuff. This is tough stuff. This is real. We're not playing in a sandbox right now. This is real life.
Well, I've personally been through it a few times, and I've been successful and I've been unsuccessful. So I'm, people that are very close to me. So I know it's not a game. So.
And admittedly, like we think of, if we go back to that myth that we shared earlier about the clinicians being the main solution, me as a clinician last year, I lost 2 clients that I was working with to suicide. And, you go back and you look through every progress note, you reread everything, you look at your treatment plan, and you try to find a chink in the armor. And a lot of times you don't find anything, and it's exhausting because then you don't know what you could change. The only thing I know is I'm not going to stop trying. I'm not going to stop trying to get better every day. And I'm not going to maybe I'll be a little bit more willing to go there quicker next time. Maybe if I see something, I'll be a little quicker to say it and allow them to quickly say, oh no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. I mean, I just was having like a bad Friday and I was sad. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Sorry for me going to there, and let's come back into where you're at. Maybe help me understand where you're at a little bit better, because I made a pretty big jump there. Here's where tone comes into play. I think that when we think of the question, there's right and wrong ways to probably go about some things. Not everything is that black and white, but you're not thinking of killing yourself, are you? What did we notice that I did there?
Leading the witness.
I appreciate that language. That's steering for sure, right? I'm steering you towards the result that I'm hoping to hear. I'm just hoping you say no. And somebody in that scenario might say, I don't think I can share this with this person. No, I'm fine. That video that I couldn't get to play early on, the I'm good video. That's a quick way in a clinical setting is to find out how somebody's doing. Hey, how are you? I'm not making small talk. This is actually clinical work already getting started. I'm trying to figure out what your mood is that day. How are you doing? And I want to hear it straight from the horse's mouth. So I want to hear, if somebody says I'm good, I say, okay, how are you really doing? I'll just re-ask it again. I'll keep asking until I get what I think is probably where I'm going. Hey, really tell me here. I'm concerned. I'm spending my whole day sitting in this chair. You and I got 50 minutes. What are we doing here? Tell me. As much as you've got to find a way to probe to get there until you really believe that that's where you're going with it. I already mentioned like not waiting until somebody's halfway out the door at the very end of our Wisconsin goodbye. Do find a way to integrate it naturally in the conversation. So that's where some of that preparatory language would be. That, how can we set ourselves up to where this seems like it's really good? If somebody's coming in and complaining about work, be like, oh man, work is stressful. That would, for me, that would be really hard stuff to manage. Is that the only thing you got going on in life, or are you, or you got more stuff? And they might say, no, that's it. Or they could like, no, man, home stinks too. And I feel like I've got none of this and none of this and none of this. And you can say, whoa, that's a lot. Where are you feeling like suicide? I feel like somebody in a similar situation could, and be able to give them a safe opportunity to say, you know what? Yeah. Or to be like, no, I'm not there yet. Then me and my clinician mind, I would say, well, how would I know if you're there? How could I be helpful? Me as your friend, how could I be helpful? Any thoughts about this particular matrix up here with some do's and don'ts?
I think there might be some, and you have to gauge every situation, but I think there might be some goodness in the shock value of, you don't want to blurt it out, but saying, are you thinking about killing yourself? Because I noticed the do lower left-hand side of the slide, a natural way, okay. But I think they're also, instead of, upper right, you're not looking for a no answer. So somewhere in between that, when you ask the question, are you thinking about killing yourself? That in and of itself is almost like, if you receive that, oh my God, I'm busted. And you then the person might then say, okay, yeah, I guess maybe I'm not articulating that well enough, but I think there may be some value in, I think the value in asking the question direct is a little bit of the shock value of the question. I think in a way it's sort of, the person might feel, hey, I'm found out, and so now I want to talk about it. I guess, does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. It's validating. You just validated somebody's experience. You asked the question that hit right where they were at. And every time I will say every time, I generally don't try to speak in absolutes like that, but every time I have asked somebody the question and they've responded with yes, everything after that has gotten better in that moment in time, that it allowed somebody to open up and genuinely talk about it because they could tell that I cared and I was curious and I was genuinely here to help. I wasn't there to create more problems for them. And once we got that out of the way, all right, now we can start to focus on what's next. What are some solutions? Because nobody's going to make the effort to get in front of you to talk about that without wanting some help. And that if somebody's done that, if somebody makes it all the way into an appointment for me in a clinical situation, there is so much that went into getting to that chair that day, that they do want help. They do want to work on it. They just might not be able to figure out how to do it right now. And having an objective point of view could be really helpful. Yep. All right, validation. If anybody lives in big cities, I usually get to make the validate parking joke. I'm gonna leave that one out because I know in Rockford I've never had problems parking. There's always plenty of places to hide a car. But what is validation? It's definitely not passing judgment. You're going to be tuned into their experience and how that's going. Maybe not what whether things are good or bad, right? Suicidal thinking is neither good nor bad. It is that it's information, and that we can get to the next step. And so, that's kind of like a dialectical way of thinking. If anybody finds yourself really living in the right, wrong, yes, no, black, white, dialectical ways of thinking can really open up to a lot of experiences that either there's space in between, or, the answer is 0 or whatever is okay too. Whatever it is, that's what it is. And that's okay. Reassuring that help is available. And that goes for anybody. You can simply sit down, like I said, and call the crisis line together. You could drive somebody into the emergency room and say, hey, I'll come with you. We'll get you screened by somebody and really see what their thoughts are on what maybe the best level of care is for you. If you get admitted, okay, we'll develop a plan. I'll go let the dog out, whatever. If you don't, then I'll take you back home and we'll kind of figure out what else we're going to do at home. And that I'm going to be here with you for this amount of time, or at least being able to explain and say, man, at 3 o'clock, I have to be out of here. Until then, how helpful can I be? And is it okay if maybe we transition you to this, or get you on the phone with somebody that you love, or something along those lines? And if it's not a person who they have within their own social supports, that's when we reach out to professional supports like the crisis line and whatnot. Be open about it, be willing to listen, allow it. This is the hardest part. This is where you all have the advantage. In a therapy situation, I'm booked. I don't have control over my booking. I'm in clinic from 8 till 5, and I do what I'm told during those times. I'm given 60 minutes, but really 50, because the last time I've got a document. In my mind, I'm always kind of peeking at the clock, figuring out how can we tie this up neatly at the end. And if we get it, whenever during the session this happens to be, if I'm not on my game and I wait until the very last second and finally ask the question and I get the answer that says, yes, I was having suicidal thoughts. Well, now I've got to change things, right? I'm really stuck by the clock. Where if that happens for you folks out there, just be honest with the person about what your timeline looks like. See if you can rearrange things or find something else to do. But in reality, if you've got some open-ended schedule, this is where you can really sit and let the thing breathe. Let that moment hit for a second and just be like, oof, okay. Yes, okay, things are serious. And then just let it be and let some silence happen. Sometimes just letting the space breathe can be really helpful. Any questions about validating, whether somebody has an example of what to do or what not to do and wants a little feedback? Aaron was like, nope, I'm hitting mute button again quick before I accidentally.
No, because I have to talk to my dog for a second.
Fair enough. It's funny. It's been a while since I've gotten a chance. I guess today I did one, but during COVID, I was doing group and individual therapy like this, and never realized how much attention I would pay to the little microphone in the corner of the box.
Yeah, right.
It's telling. All right, so here's what do we do? This is the simple part. The hard part was asking the question. Validating, do it to your level of comfort. This part, I think, is where a lot of folks generally get tied up, because we don't know what to do. And I would just ask simply, well, what do you think is right? I've got a 4-year-old daughter, and she comes up and asks questions. She doesn't want the answer. She's trying to figure out if the answer in her head is right. And so I'm not going to answer. I'm going to say, well, what do you think? And then she'll tell me the answer. And so far, she's doing pretty good. So when you ask somebody, they say, I don't know what to do. And if you don't know what to do, you can say, geez, what do you think we should start with? I don't know. Well, when's the last time you got in a situation like this? It's like this. Then you say, what did you do? Or you can say, well, I don't know. Should we call somebody? Can we call somebody together? Is that okay? And you're probably not going to go wrong with this crisis line. It's not a perfect solution, but it's It's a really good solution. I have a friend of mine that was employed here at the Madison VA as a peer specialist. Great guy, loads of life experience. And we lost him because he went and worked at the Veterans Crisis Line now as a supervisory peer. And one of my good friends is gone. But for the benefit of all of us, they're hiring some pretty talented people. Even one of the peer specialists I had speak at a conference today, a gentleman named Jay Zimmerman, find me a better peer support specialist than that guy. Great guy, and he works at the Veterans Crisis Line. And so they're able to find some really talented and qualified people. And I think the person that picks up the phone is going to be very helpful for you. And if that happens, the person on the phone has the choice to allow the local VA to be involved. If somebody calls a crisis line and say, yes, well, I'm okay if you notify my local VA, within seconds, we get a consult placed for our suicide prevention team, who then will notify their entire treatment team and then come up with a plan and then engage that person immediately the next business day. These are metrics that we run really tight, because in government work, the reason it can be slow sometimes is that everything is being tracked and evaluated. But there are some processes like suicide prevention that, we do have metrics, but we get to move very quickly. We don't have to be slow. And in fact, we encourage the system to cease all operations until this other thing is fixed. Let's reprioritize our problems today. That was a good way for me to get out of, if I was involved with somebody that we were doing a safety plan for and I had clinic booked, I would just notify my suicide prevention coordinator, and 10 minutes later, I'd be notified the rest of my day was taken care of. That's how effective we can be in that. Worst case scenario, like I said, call 911 if you have to. Those dispatchers, it's not the first time they've gotten that call. They'll know where to direct you. Looking at the crisis line, I guess I'll revisit a little bit, is next year, there's going to be an evolution to where instead of calling that big number, you just call 988. It'll be a much cleaner thing. That'll be in July of 2022. Right now, all the funding's been appropriated. The agencies know it's coming. At this point, they're hiring staff to be able to pull it off, because it's going to be a pretty big thing. Don't keep it a secret. Aaron, you had mentioned like not wanting to break somebody's confidentiality. Do you feel any differently at this point in the process, or are you still where you were?
I think so far it's working. Just kind of headed up the pipeline. Usually I call like Katie Beck or something, and I just say, hey, somebody said they feel like they've taken a turn for the worst, or they're just feeling really down. Can you keep an eye on that? And she'll just say, I'm on it. So that works that way. But I haven't had a situation where somebody is specifically suicidal at this point that I work with through the program. So I've been lucky in that respect. So,
well, what if right now you just asked me the question and I said yes?
I would probably, now I would do what you've instructed. I would probably go right through the list. My tendency as a human, though, is I am a problem solver, and I try now at least to, if somebody wants to talk to me about something, especially in my own personal life, I say, are you venting right now, or are you looking for me to help you find a solution? Ooh. So I'm really working on that.
You know how many marriages you could save with that information?
I didn't do so hot with my own, but maybe a couple years ago.
Again, we're all getting better every day. Maybe that's for that.
Right. We're working on it. Right. That's what this is all about. But yeah, this is tough stuff. So
again, go with the simplest, cleanest solution. Usually I just ask, hey, can we call somebody? Who can we call to figure this out? I'm here to sit with you. I'm not going to leave.
Yeah. And then just knowing who to call, like what resources you have.
Remember, 911 is one of them.
Well, and sometimes people don't want you to escalate things to a certain, they don't want you to, it's embarrassing. It's an embarrassing, nobody wants to feel like they're vulnerable enough to take their own lives. That's why so many people just do it in private and they, hide it. But yeah, you just have to be somebody that they can be vulnerable around, I guess.
Totally.
And not judgmental.
and go with your gut. Again, like I'm not going to hit you over the head with anything new. Really, what I hope is just to give you permission and some confidence to be able to go there and sit with it and be with that person and do the best you can. If they're not comfortable with you calling 911, okay, so maybe it's not that serious. Do we want to call somebody else?
Right.
If there's nobody we can call, hey, I'm going to sit here with you. Let me know when it's okay.
Yeah.
I really care about you.
Hey, Adam.
Yep, go ahead.
We live in a world of words, and words mean something, right? Which is what this is really all about, how you approach the problem. But one of the things that I really liked that you said that I've heard before, when you say, you're talking about a permanent solution to a temporary problem or a problem that may not last forever. I think that hits pretty hard. And I think that may be a good segue into now let's talk about getting some help. Because when you say, look, this is a permanent solution to something that is not going to be around forever, dude, you need to think about that. Then it sort of takes the emotion and it turns it into logic. And I think that may be something that is powerful. The other thing that I learned is one of the things I think Winnebago County has done that's right. I am totally not a defund the police kind of guy, but one of the things that's come out of that movement, at least in Winnebago County, is linking mental health response to emergency response. So the first time we really started getting some help with our grandson is I don't even know why I did it. I just said I have a mental health emergency. When I said those words on 911 taped, within 24 hours, I got a call from someone that was linked into the system, actually out of Rosecrans. They've been wonderful. And I think that is part of what, linking those mental health professionals to emergency first response is brilliant. This 988 thing, I've kind of sort of heard about it. I'm not really sure exactly what it is, and I've been a professional emergency first responder all my life in one way, shape, or form. I'm not sure what 988 means. And before I forget, Major General Greg Martin, Martin, amazing guy, is now speaking on what bipolar did to him. So if you really want to get tied into someone who was the president of National Defense University and relieved by Martin Dempsey for being bipolar and all the things he went through and his family went through, he writes about it, he lectures. Tremendous resource. Good friend of mine. I used to work for him. Major General Greg, he's amazing.
Found in his work. Yeah.
So,
like I said, General Martin was awesome. The only, if anybody's ever going to get a criticism, is that he had some status in his career when he started to disclose his mental health stuff like that.
Mhm.
So like, if there's any opportunity for criticism, it's, well, now you're kind of protected from the career outcomes. But from my perspective, any time is fine. If anybody wants to be helpful and share and do all that, that's awesome. The one thing I might also add, David, is like the temporary permanent thing is that you logically where you're at, you see that as a temporary problem, permanent solution to a temporary problem, but they have that changed. For them, it is a very permanent problem. And being
right,
able to
right,
see that in their language and be able to say, man, this seems like this stuff's going to go like this forever.
right.
Right now, life seems untenable.
Roger.
And so how can I help us get to the other side? Because some folks that have made it to the other side and are doing a little bit better, they're seeing those problems as being a bit more temporary. And I'd like to help you get there because I care about you.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, thank you for allowing me to share those thoughts.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that stuff. None of this is good unless we don't have some examples to bring up.
Mr. Drager?
Yes, sir.
Major General, the Major General, was he let go of the service for the bipolar DX?
Was he, say again? Was he what?
Was he relieved for having a bipolar diagnosis?
Yeah. So he's very open about it, writes about it, talks about it, um, lectures on it. Um, he was the president of National Defense University. He's a West Point graduate, airborne ranger, commanded a brigade in Iraq, saw a lot of combat. He very creditable guy. He was the president of NDU when the chairman of the Joint Chiefs says, "Greg, something's wrong. You either need to resign, or I'm going to have to do something different." And that was the end of his career. And then he went through a long period of treatment and thought about taking his own life, and went through a very dark period. And now is a big advocate of, um, look, you have to make a decision uh, to fight your mental illness. It's just like it's diabetes, heart disease, whatever. It's an illness. You have to identify the illness. You have to say that you have it. You have to work on it every day. You have to take your meds. You have to overcome it. You have to be a bipolar survivor. And in my conversations with him, because I used to work for him, he's great, unbelievable leader, great guy. I worked for him. So my conversations are with him, okay, and he's very open about it. You think it might possibly bother him, but doesn't, because he's a great leader. So, sir, let's talk about what mental illness does to family members, because mental illness will suck in your family, will suck the life out of your life. Can you talk to me about that? And I'm thinking about writing that and about that. And he is very open to it. So, yeah, you can just Google him, Major General Greg Martin, and see some of the stuff he's written. And it's just good stuff. He even has some prayers online for mental illness, and very cool guy. So I just offer that up as a resource, and someone that's willing to destigmatize at the expense of his own um, you know reputation or whatever. But I think the good Lord has placed him in the right place, and he's going to do tremendous things for people in crisis. So thanks for asking.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, gentlemen.
Sure.
Additionally, I'm going to share a few slides of resources. Just briefly, I will
Thank
send
you,
out
sir.
feedback as well. If anybody has any questions about VA stuff, we've got the websites here, but again, like the power of the search engine these days, if you type in, veteran healthcare, Rockford, Illinois, you're probably going to get a pretty good result. And so just trust using, pull out that smartphone and start to Google some stuff and say, hey, let's pull out our phones and let's see what's out there. Maybe we can find something. Otherwise, you can check out our formal websites. We do have the community-based outpatient clinic in the Rockford area to include. We have a homeless program. There's the Veterans Drop-In Center, the museum, a lot of great places to start. There is no wrong door. A lot of us who do work in the mental health space where it intersects with veteran space, we tend to know each other. And so as Erin mentions, she knows Katie, Katie probably sees an email from me at least once a week. Matt Heldman, the gentleman that I mentioned earlier, those two collaborated on a lot of great projects. And so it can be a small community. So there really isn't a wrong door. Like I'd mentioned, the 988 resource that will be coming out, it's going to be equivalent to any other emergency resource that really, you can call pretty much anybody. You call NAMI, you're going to get somebody there that'll probably be able to be helpful during normal business hours. Check their website. I've listed that already. There's just so much good stuff that if you get a little curious, you'll find it. There are even apps on the phone. If you're sitting with a veteran and you're trying to problem solve ways to cope, you can say, hey, I heard from this one guy, there's some different apps you can download that'll help you. This PTSD coach app, we also have some non-PTSD, like we have a COVID coach. We've got some other ones that they have guided meditations on there. You just push play and throw in your headphones. There's places to log how you're doing. There's places where you can complete your own safety plan if you want to actually see all these things and how they come together. These apps are really helpful. We've got the crisis line, as you can see it. Again, remember the press 1 there is for veterans, but anybody can call that 1-800 number and get connected with the National Call Center. My mouse is hard to control. As far as some data points, though, over time, you can see that the call centers fielded over 4 million calls. The call volume, you could see the way that it goes. So like the different inputs, and then it led to 138, health and welfare calls. The only thing I'll probably say is before you jump to the point of engaging our law enforcement community is kind of like what David highlighted is this the best solution for this problem? If you know that maybe it's a veteran and they have some level of animosity towards law enforcement, or just in general, maybe don't want anybody at their home, think of that. Because when the police roll in, they're going to roll in deep. They might not always roll in with the lights off and quietly ring the doorbell. That we want to be sensitive to that as well and say, hey, I really need to call somebody, but if I call the police, is that bad? Is there somebody else I can call? How can we work this out together? But I would definitely hesitate or encourage you to go in the direction of contacting somebody if that's the way it's going. Make the Connection here. That's a good resource to tool around on. If you just Google Make the Connection, a lot of pre-made videos and things like that that can be helpful. You can learn little tidbits and hear stories. I think storytelling is maybe one of the more powerful ways for us all to connect. We've been doing it for so long. Why stop? It probably even it influences the style that I do when I do these talks. And I apologize that we've gone over. The folks that had to leave have left. And so I hope we're doing okay in that regard. The Be There initiative, we actually are reframing this. I'll have to update that slide next month when it's official. But we're changing our slogan when it comes to this from Be There to Reach Out, because being there sometimes isn't enough. We do want to be there, but I think the next step is really we want to engage with folks. That if we can engage with the people and the systems and all the things that are around it, that we're doing a lot better. So again, that friend who's been quiet for a while, take the long way home and knock on their door and see how they're doing. It might make a world of difference. And then finally, that's my email again. I'll put it in here again. I encourage folks to let me know. If I don't take as many questions or have as much engagement, I can get this under an hour pretty easily. I prefer to let it go to 90 if I can, so we can have some pretty good engagement. If you know of any other group that I can get in front of, please let me know. If it's not me, it'll be Vicky, one of our suicide prevention coordinators. If they're out of our area, I'll find another VA to do it. I've got contacts across the nation. It's very easy for me to get somebody up on instant messenger and start berating them until they finally talk to me. And I'm being a little bit joking there, but it's not hard for me to get in touch with people. Diana, I worked for Rosecrans for like 9 months way back in the day before I went back to undergrad. So that's cool. Rosecrans is a phenomenal resource in the community. And if you really learn about Rosecrans as a program, they're helping in so many ways most people aren't even aware of. There's so many good things happening. And Aaron, yes, I will send out the PowerPoint. I tried to attach it here in the Zoom file, but it wants me to use Dropbox or Google Drive, and the VA frowns upon those things. So what I will do, and I think actually Danielle might already have my slides as a way to get the CEUs approved. Those slides are good to forward out. Again, email me. I'll just respond with the slides in tow. So if right now you just want to email me, that's fine. I'll respond and I'll include the PowerPoint.
Yeah, and I was going to send out the PowerPoint with the recording of tonight as well tomorrow to those that have, both that are in attendance tonight and those that couldn't make it. So you'll be getting them from me. Excellent. And thank you, Adam, for the awesome presentation. I appreciate it.
And I'm willing to do it in person as well. So, if there's any group you can imagine me getting in front of, I'm happy to wear a mask or not wear a mask. I generally don't like to wear suits and ties, so please prevent me from having to do that. Even putting on a golf shirt can be a little bit much these days in the world of COVID. But I thank you for all your attention and time. I will stick around on the call. If anybody has any additional questions, I'm happy to chat. But go for it out there. Really do ask the question. Really know that being direct is okay. And just be human with it. Be compassionate and be yourself. And I think that'll be okay. If all of a sudden if you're a rough and tough person that all of a sudden is very nice and sensitive, that might be a bit of a radical change for somebody to digest. Be yourself as you do it. And good luck out there. Take care of each other.